I got no internet in here. Only video game I have is Skullgirls, and I can't even seem to get this controller to work properly, even though Steam recognizes it. It doesn't seem to work with Skullgirls because it's the Linux version, so I assume there's various kinks within that don't necessarily line up with the ones in the Windows version, but before this controller worked. Now it doesn't. And I've just been sitting here like a maniac trying to get it to work because I hate playing the game with the keyboard. The keyboard functions terribly with the game. It's not easy to play the game with the keyboard. Fighting games in general are not good without a pad. So I've just been sitting here scrambling to get this to work, and I can't even work on anything YouTube-wise because there's no way to upload. There's no way to access ideas in my Google Doc. There's no way to access other fucking clips and stuff to work on videos. So I've just been sitting here utterly bored and have had nothing to do. Can't talk to anyone either because you need the internet for that. I've been walking around, I've been going outside and doing things, but now it's dark, so I can't really walk. So I've been stuck here where at the earliest I can get internet is October 10th. And that's assuming that we actually have the money to pay for it. That's 7 days from now. It's 7 days of just doing the same thing again and again and again and again. It's terrible. I've been reading The Invisible Man, and that's been enjoyable, but the thing about me is that I can only focus on one task for so long before I start losing my concentration. And as much as I enjoy that book, I can't spend too long on it in one sitting without moving on to something else. And so, here I've been, sitting in this room, trying to get this controller to work, with nothing on my mind but a wish for an internet connection. It's pretty quiet in here. I find it weird to think about that so much of my life has been placed upon the internet that when that element of one's life is taken away, it feels utterly empty. It makes me wonder what life will be like when I eventually transition to one in which the internet is not the key factor. Because by this point, the only thing that I think about, the only thing that keeps me waking up, the only thing that I find solace in day to day, other than momentary things such as taking walks or momentary things such as reading a book for a while, is the internet. Because I've put myself in a situation where I rely entirely on it for my satisfaction in life. I rely on being able to go on Discord to talk to people who I like. I rely on my work, my purpose in work, YouTube, to be connected to an internet service that I don't control. And so the issue that comes with this inherently is that one must rely on others in order to stimulate such a thing. And problem with that is that when you rely on others, there tends to be kinks in the system. And by that I mean complications with people's lives, which may be money, which may be time, when it comes to the workers who need to come out and put the internet in the house. Whatever it is, you're still relying on other people to do the things that you want. And that's a problem. But society can't really function without that, now can it? So you're always at the helm of others. And it turns out that sometimes when you do that, it fucking sucks. Because you have to wait. But that's why you don't put all your eggs in one basket, eh? That's why you find purpose and find enjoyment in things that don't require an internet connection. But in order to do that, we need to have stuff, right? We need to have things in a house. But when you just move to a house, there's nothing here. All my video games are in Tennessee. My video games aren't in Caribou, Maine. They're in Indian Mound, Tennessee. The ones that aren't there are in Kentucky, in a storage unit. It's gonna take me months until I can go down, get those video games, and maybe even longer until I can actually get a TV. So what do I do until then? I sit here and I try to get this fucking controller to work with Skullgirls. I always have found this whole internet existence thing that I've garnered from myself a bit odd, because every single day when I wake up, the first thing I think about is I'm gonna check Discord. If you think about 2017, that was not my thought process. First thing I thought about was, I am going to check YouTube. Still relying on the internet, right? But it was different. There wasn't the element of people there. It was a sort of progression that led me to eventually doing that, to eventually having friends. Because if you think about before that, I had no friends. I just sat around every day in my room, listened to podcasts. I was actually pretty content with that. Sure, I was depressed as shit, but I feel like I could have done that for quite a bit longer, but I needed something a bit more. So I go to Discord. I meet people through there. Now I talk to people every day when I actually have internet. That was a progression. Before I had YouTube to satiate my desires every single day, satiate my boredom, I had video games. That didn't require internet, it just required electricity. And I mean, by this point, electricity is a rather common commodity that you can't even go to a house in some states without turning on the electricity first. Of course, in this state, we were allowed to sleep in it without electricity, but in Oklahoma, it was outright illegal to do that. So, electricity is a common thing in most houses in the first world. You know, you can't have a house without electricity in most cases. I mean, Oklahoma had some weird laws too, where like in Shawnee, you weren't allowed to live in a place if you had 3 pets. Like, we had 3 dogs, and the landowner of the trailer that we were renting, he was kind of being nice to us and just letting us keep the 3 dogs. He was breaking the law with that. But if you saw the guy in the trailer park who was our neighbor, he had like 6 dogs, you know, and some of them were like huge. So he didn't seem to particularly care that much about what the law was. But regardless, states tend to have regulations about these things. So electricity is a common thing. So you can set up a video game, you can set up a TV, and that's an immediate thing that you don't really have to rely on others for. With a TV, you know, when I was in Oklahoma, I walked down the street in Shawnee. I walked past the Arby's, I walked past all the buildings till you're getting to the highway, and I found a thrift store. When I walked in there, I quickly found a $10 television. It's just a small little CRT, you know, nothing significant, but nonetheless, it was a television. It did function like a television. You could use it, you could turn it on, it had sound. I saw another one for $8, and it did more or less the same things, except it didn't have an S-video port. You know, you pay that $2 extra for the S-video port, right? You could find those things. They were readily available. You can go down to the Salvation Army down there, get a fucking table for like nothing. You can go to the church and get food for like nothing. These things are common. You don't really have to rely on other people to a great extent just because they're everywhere. First world has everything, you know. Internet. Internet, however, is not such a common resource. You have to pay, $50 to get it set up. That's quite a bit. But the point I'm trying to make here is when I was a fan of video games, when I had video games around, that was an easy thing to rely on because I could wake up every day, do whatever tasks were beholden to me, and then I could play video games. It was fine. Just spend the rest of the day playing video games. Don't have to rely on anybody to get that set up. Don't have to have any outside factors that could potentially break down. I mean, power sometimes goes out during a storm, but most grids nowadays are actually optimized to deal with the rain and stuff. Tennessee, the electric companies were kind of cheap, and it was a very rural part of Tennessee, so every time there was a bad storm, the power would go out. But in most places, like, say, Mississippi no, Missouri, that's the one. In Missouri, it just rains constantly. And the way that they do their electricity there, in the time that I was in Missouri, they had it completely optimized to deal with terrible storms. Same with Oklahoma, the way that their grids and everything worked was optimized to deal with tornadoes in the time that I spent there. And so people find ways around the natural disasters that surround them. In Maine, the state that I'm currently living in, people deal with fucking snow all the time. And the cities are built to deal with those things. They identified the problem and they found a way to fix it. But regardless, electricity is a common resource. You don't really have to rely on very much, and it's pretty able to keep afloat. So when I was a video game fan, when that was my bread and butter, I was in a safe space. Because I didn't have to worry. I didn't have to worry about that shit going out. But now that I have to rely on people to talk to, now that I have to rely on YouTube to stay around and have their servers not crash, now that I have to rely on an internet connection to do all two of those things, it gets a bit muddy. You start relying on a few more factors than you should have to. This is why I need a video game collection again. Because this shit is way too much to be relying on. This shit is too much. You can't be relying on others. You have to rely on as little of other people as you can. Only thing at the end of the day you can truly trust is yourself, your own volition. And I guess relying so much on the internet has led me down a path of despair because it requires me to be at the helm of other people. I miss when I used to just spend all my time in my room collecting and playing the same video games over again. Time was more serene. The time was more comfy. I was told by someone I knew, someone I used to know, old friend of mine, that if I just deserted everyone, that it may even be good for me. That at this time in my life, with the issues that I'm working out, if I simply didn't talk to anybody, maybe that would be good. Because as a being as destructive and depressive as I can be, maybe it would be too emotionally exhausting for some people. And I think about her words, and I remember back to when I used to play video games every day. to when I would wake up and the only thing I would be relying on would be the electricity functioning to turn on another game of Ninja Gaiden. Then I think about Discord server errors, and I think about the fact that Spectrum people, this neighborhood probably can't come out for another week if I even have the money to pay for that shit. I think about her words. If I abandon everyone, maybe I wouldn't be so destructive for them. Maybe I wouldn't be so destructive for myself. I don't know what to do. I'm in this house, and I just feel so alone. I've never had a problem with being alone. I've been alone about my entire life. It's always been something I've done. I grew up homeschooled from the beginning. Didn't start even consistently interacting with people until 12 and a half. It was such a normal occurrence. I found myself enraptured by fantasy, lost in fantasy, and that was okay. I sort of felt apathetic to the emotions of everybody else, to the emotions of my own. Never really reacted to things so strongly. I was just kind of in my own world, quiet, and playing video games. Something makes me want to go back to that. Something makes me feel like I should go back to that. I don't know. What the fuck was this vlog? You know, when I think about going back and just retconning everything, delete Discord, delete etc., going back to the state that I used to be in, the question on my mind is, why video games? Why is it video games that I continually take solace in and want to go back to, no matter how accosted I may be at the time, no matter what seems to be going on? It's always video games that I go back to. And I've thought about this. I think the reason why, beyond simply that there aren't many external factors that can tarnish my ability to play video games, i.e. electricity going out, etc., there's also the element of it always being there with me. I've always been a video game person. Since I was very young. It was a medium that enticed me and continues to entice me for its ability to immerse all of my senses. I've talked in length about why video games appeal to me so much in videos like Cuphead, an immersive masterpiece, and videos like Hard Games Are a Relaxing Distraction, videos like Can Money Make Harder Games More Appealing, my taste in video games, etc. I've talked about all these things. Even the Masochist review to an extent, and the Pong videos, I've talked about why I love video games so much. And I think the reason why this is something that I always go back to is because I am a person who is constantly in flux. I'm always going back and forth between different things. I'm always retconning certain elements of my personality or certain decisions that I've made in utter confusion. Video games, that's the one constant. That's the one thing that I've always been able to go back to for its immersive and distracting qualities. And so, when everything goes wrong, when I have an identity crisis and I feel that I don't know what to do, one thing I can always look back to is collecting and amassing a collection of video games. And I've never felt that I have a distinct personality. I've tried to have one. I've tried to feel that I am a person or that I am a consistent being, but I've gotten so lost in my own lies and manipulation for other people that I've begun to forget who I am. This is something that I noticed in the Shane video on Jake Paul, where they were talking about sociopaths, and they were talking about how sociopaths, they spend so long manipulating people and lying that they don't really have a clear sense of self. And that was something that I related to on a very, very visceral level, because I've always been ashamed of my interests and of who I wanted to be until a little bit later in life. And I became accustomed to lying because in my household, I felt that it was something I had to do in order to keep myself safe, even to an extent, from my brother or from my father. Because I didn't want to be ridiculed or, in some cases hurt. And so I just lied. And then later on, the lying became less of a self-defense mechanism and more of a way to manipulate things and to manipulate people. I used my lies to steal money from my own family, my parents even. I never felt bad about it. I just manipulated the situation yet again and said, oh, I'm so sorry, oh, this, that, and the other, but I never felt guilty for it. I just lied. I just lied my way out of it. Continued doing illegal things like that. Just lied my way out of it. And when it came to people, I always saw that in order to get what I wanted out of them, to avoid ridicule, to avoid negative factors in my life, I had to lie about my interests, about who I was, because that's how you optimize the most out of people. You pretend to be the person that they want to see. And so I constantly do this all the time, that when I would meet a new person, I would come up with a new self-image, come up with a new lie in order to cater to their needs. And over time, I did this so much that I found myself mixing in the few truths that exist of myself with the lies. And after so long of doing that, eventually it became hard to distinguish which one was even true anymore, which one was a manipulation to get what I wanted, and which one was just who I was. And there were very few constants in that time. I had a lot of nights where I was up trying to figure out exactly what or who I was. I've been diagnosed with so many things. I've diagnosed myself with so many things just because the elements at present many times are falsifications. So, even this YouTube guy who you see is someone who I've crafted, granted, out of elements of myself that I believe to be true and that I believe to be the most genuine parts, but nonetheless, it's still crafted, even though this is the most honest thing I have. And so, to an extent, everything people do is crafted, but Like, they know there's a truth behind them. They know there are constants in their life that they can go back to and say, this is who I am. I don't have that. The only thing I have for that is video games. I don't know who I am. I don't know what I am. And so, in order to feel like I do, I always go back to the thing that I started out doing when I was 2 years old. That's right, 2 years old started playing video games. And when I do that now, I can reconnect with the thing that's been there for the last 14 years. Video game collecting. When I was 7, I believe, got interested in collecting this stuff. Still collect video games, don't really have money to do it, and don't really have my consoles here, but I'd still like to. Still an interest I have. It's still something that makes me immensely happy. Joy, actual joy, genuine, not something that I'm making myself feel in that. It's like actual joy when I see a video game collection, when I see the hikikomori den of people's collections and manga and video games just everywhere. Physical media, physical items, buying the stuff, seeing the stuff, holding the stuff. That's something that gives me a sense of happiness when I do it and when I see it. So like, if I can sit there and I can see images of PC-98s and Commodores and Amigas just lined up with each other, and then manga stacked on top of that in the same room, when I see that image and I get happy, that's something that I can clearly define as being myself, you know? That emotion, it's so raw and so visceral and has happened with me for so long that I can immediately say, that's who I am. That's something I can identify with. And then so I seek it out. Even though the feelings have kind of waned as I've gotten older, like the excitement hasn't been as strong as I've gotten older, but it's still nonetheless been there. And I think that's really important. That if the excitement stays there, then it's still real. Sure, with all things, you get less excited about it over time. You can only have the honeymoon phase with anything, any person, any medium for so long. But as long as that childlike sense of excitement remains there, as long as you're still invested in it, as long as you're still checking pricecharting.com all the time, you know, as long as you still see images and it makes you feel a little something of video game collections and all that, then it's still there. Passion's still there. Passion falls out here and now, but the important thing is that it remains in the long term. And that's the only thing I've really had that's been like that. And so I cherish it, right? It's something that no matter how many identity crises or whatever happens, it's always something I can go back to because it's the one thing where I can say, this is mine. This is who I am, right? And so it's the thing I immediately fall back on. And I think that's nice to have. I think that feels really good to be able to have something like that. Because when everything else is tumbling down and you don't know who you are, and when, you know, you feel that you have no idea what's going on, it's good to have at least one thing that you're sure about. And for me, the thing that I'm sure about is video games. It feels nice. It really does feel nice that I can have that. When I don't have anything else, at least I can have that. So, you know, things can be a bit messy at times, but the one thing that I feel that is truly mine can always be video games and video game collecting, and that's a reason to stick around. There's been many times where I felt that I had no reason to stick around, and then I think about that and I'm like, well, you know, if I can't collect the next Sega Saturn game, I can't do that when you're dead. I don't want to die, you know? So I think that's nice to have. I think it's been an immensely helpful thing for me to have. And I'm forever in gratitude to the people who designed these machines and who designed these games, and the people who, to a lesser extent, have collected all of these and have created guides on the internet, like Retro Boy and Neo Geo Collector and Hardcore Gaming 101 and all these different things. The website GameFAQs is a great resource. All these people who've amassed such a grand library of information on the internet, I wouldn't have been able to get so far without them. Although I may, one of these days, just make my own website and then, like, create a resource talking about, like, dev kits and stuff for old Japanese machines that aren't really talked about. PC Engine stuff, there's a lot of resources out there about it, but I just want to, like, buy every game and then make, like, the definitive PC Engine resource to where I just talk about every single game and have, screenshots, have all the technical information that I can find. And learning Japanese would help with that to a great extent because, if I can speak and read Japanese, then I can speak more in depth about what the visual novels are about, and maybe go to Japan and find old magazines that they have to find information about the staff and about the actual companies that worked on these things, because Japan has an amazing amount of magazines that just aren't translated and just don't have the information out there in the public. And so it would be amazing to just go out and buy all of these old magazines from, like, a collector's store, like Hard Off, etc., and then be able to come back and bring the information to everybody. And that is one of my biggest goals when I finally get my collection in this room to a big enough degree that I can really sit down and talk about every single game in depth, and at some point start working on my own game, start learning about all the different things from the games that I've been playing for so long, and then try to apply those techniques to something of my own. I think that would be really fun. Like, I'm thinking about this and I get happy, right? Like, this is a genuine reaction of me being happy thinking about this. It's such a weird idea to me. Like, I'm sitting here and it's like there's no analytical brain about this. There's no, overthinking. It's just happiness. That is a sensation that I rarely feel, and video games give me that fucking constantly, So that's my thing. Like, if I leave everybody and if I'm just not interested in anything, that's gonna be my thing. YouTube as well, because YouTube has also been a constant in my life, though not for as long. I doubt this is something that I'm ever going to truly leave, but YouTube and video games, man. That's what I started out on here with, and that's what I'm going to keep doing. Oh, boy. Yeah, just thinking about that idea of, like, making a website and making a guide for all the PC Engine games. It's fucking... Oh my god. It makes me so happy. And I'd like to do the same thing for the PC-98. Just NEC products in general are something that, like, deeply fascinate me because it was so based in Japan at the time. Sega Saturn as well. The Sega Saturn, if you go to Japan, you can just buy in mass a bunch of games for, like, $1 in US, like $3, like barely any money. And you see all these resellers, they go on eBay and they put everything up for tons and tons of money. It's just terrible. But if you actually go to Japan, you can get a fuck ton of Sega Saturn games, and it's incredible. That's something I would love to do. And I mean, there are more Sega Saturn resources out there, but there's not enough about, heavy Japanese games. Like, visual novels and RPGs and stuff. Like the Evangelion RPG, that game was entirely in Japanese, so there's not a lot of information on it. And if I could go out there and if I could read Japanese and then maybe like make a let's play where I read through the entire game essentially as a translation, that would be so cool. Like I would be able to take this information out and bring it back and show it to other people. How fucking cool would that be? Like, oh my god. And this is the thing. This is the thing that, it makes me feel real to think about this stuff. And that feels good. I can't describe how good that feels. So, when I'm sitting here wanting to go outside and literally stab somebody just for fun, video games, when I'm sitting here and I'm thinking about how, I've just lied to so many different people in order to get what I want. Video games, you know. I don't really know who I am, but I do know one thing. It's that I'm a fucking gamer. That's when everything else has crumbled, I have that. And I've kind of repeated myself a million times, which is a sign that I'm having fun because I'm not thinking about my words anymore. I'm just saying them. That's good. It's a good feeling. The problem with me nowadays is that I don't really have anything to look forward to as I see it. I tend to think, well, I'm just going to do things day to day, but the problem with day to day is that there's not really much to do. You're just sort of thinking about your everyday pleasures, and over time, as you do, this hedonistic way of life, you lack a long-term goal. And not having that is going to make you upset because you don't feel that there's anything to do those day-to-days for, right? That you're simply living for the pleasures of everything, but when those pleasures start to die out, 3 days in, when the intrigue of doing things for the pleasure of doing them begins to wane, as it does for many depressed people, then you start to lose hope because you don't really have something that you're striving towards. And so when you have no standards in that regard, everything begins to sort of whittle away and crumble. You need something as a purpose. And for many people, their purpose is their family or their children. And that allows them to continue going because in their mind, they think about these people are going to be better as a direct product of my actions. These people are going to grow into more successful and cool people because of the things that I do. And I'm going to wait for them to be super cool. And every single day that I wait is another day that I'm getting towards that. And it makes powering through those days much easier for those people because they have a goal and a purpose that keeps those day-to-days being cool long term, right? It gives them something to look forward to. And I was reading The Invisible Man by Ralph Ellison, and there was this fantastic scene where this guy who was basically like bourgeois as fuck, like he ran the Negro school because the founder had died and everything. And he was talking about how his daughter had died in Italy. She had undergone some sort of illness, some sort of ailment that wasn't really clearly defined, and they didn't really have a treatment for it. And he was just talking about this indescribable beauty that his daughter possessed and how when she died, it was a grand tragedy for him. And it was something that he never quite recovered from other than to live for live for other people, essentially, because he was talking about the Negroes in the school and how the lives of those Negroes were going to be the direct result of his actions toward the school, the money he puts in towards the school, the planning he puts in towards the school, that the actions of those other people and the people that they become is going to decide his fate. He didn't really know his fate. And so he was asking, the Invisible Man's character, like, what is my fate? What is my destiny? And he was like, well, I'm only a junior in college, sir. I can't really tell you. And so he was saying, well, you will tell me eventually, right? And when I saw this scene, when I was reading what was going on here, now granted, I'm only like 60 something pages into the book, so I don't really know what all of this means yet, but my interpretation of it as someone who is reading the book is this guy, after his daughter died, he didn't have a long-term purpose. He didn't have something that kept his day-to-day pleasures from losing meaning after his daughter died. And so the way he finds that meaning now, the way he finds that long-term pleasure is by waiting for the Negroes to grow into more successful people as a direct result of the efforts that he puts in towards that school. And thus it gives him a sense of purpose. It gives him something to wait for from every single day that he wakes up. And I found some very relatable qualities in this character, because many, many times the purpose that I lived for, or the thing that kept me waiting and waking up every single day, has left me, or I've left it in some situations. And so nothing as tragic as losing your daughter, because I wouldn't be as connected to my child as he was, but but like it's thinking about that situation in that book, I just couldn't help but relate it to how I grew up, where when I would go on the internet and when I would look at, JJ Games or eBay or price charting and all of these different things, it gave me, innately speaking, something to work towards and something to wait for, where the acquisition of video games was something, in some regards, more important than actually playing them, because the goal was to save up enough money to buy another one. The goal was to amass the biggest collection that I could. And yeah, I played all of them. I got a fair degree into them much of the time, but the goal was always to get to the next thing. It was to wait for the next thing, to where much of the pleasure had come in the journey. Like, much of the pleasure had come into saving up this money and then going out to go get the thing. And so it had always been on my mind as I would wake up each day, I'm gonna wait for this thing. I'm gonna work for this thing. And so getting up each day became much easier because I had something that I was waiting for and that I felt was, in a weird way, like my purpose. That the reason I'm going to continue, and that the reason that I'm going to try and save up this money is to get these things, right? Nowadays, everything I do is so much more hedonistic. Nowadays, I don't really have that day-to-day purpose that I'm waiting for, that I'm thinking about. And I think the way to remedy that is to head back, is to go back to the thing that I always thought about. I'm gonna check price charting. I'm gonna save this money. I'm gonna work for this thing. That's the point of jobs in many regards, right? Is that you go to the job and it feels shitty in that day, but you're saving up that money to get a new thing. That's the way that capitalism propagates itself, is that it shows you all these shiny items and it says, hey, if you enslave yourself to this boss, you can eventually save up enough money to buy these commodities. And the fact that those commodities exist is enough to blue pill people, including myself, into living out each day waiting until they've bought the thing. Well, now their purpose is gone, so they need to buy another thing. So they see the next commodity, they save up their money, they continue working day to day, waiting. Bought the thing, on to the next one. You don't really pay much attention to them, but that's not what matters, because what matters is the fact that you're staying alive and that you continue working for the person. And so that's how things continue. That's how the cycle propagates itself. And there's nothing wrong with that because it keeps people alive. And as long as you don't think about it enough, then it feels fine, right? It gives people a reason to continue, and it gives people something to look forward to the next day. And there's nothing wrong with that because it keeps people happy. That's the way the system blue pills itself. And that's how I've blue pilled myself. I'm aware of it, but I don't care because that's the way that you get to the pleasure, right? There's nothing wrong with that. And I feel that if I went back from sitting around and watching YouTube videos or getting into conversations without any clear goal in mind, and it's metagaming conversations and just doing all these stupid things out of a product of boredom, and just went back to, I'm going to save up my money, maybe even I'm going to get a job, which is wage slavery, I know, and then doing that to buy another video game, what would be wrong with that? It would give me something to wait on. It would give me something to look forward to the next day. Maybe that's what I've been missing. Maybe that's one of the reasons why I've been so much more severely depressed than in other states in my life, where arguably I used to be more withdrawn, but I just had something to look forward to, and so I was less depressed than I am now. And I need to bring that back. No amount of SNRIs or SSRIs or Wellbutrins or etc., medications, etc. Like, no amount of those can really make up for, replace having a concrete thing you're looking forward to. And that's what I need. Had this realization when I was, as I said, reading The Invisible Man over there. And that character was talking about that. About how, every single day he's essentially going to be waiting on these people to get better and waiting on them to educate themselves. And the way he continues day to day is that he believes that those people are his destiny and that they're going to tell him his destiny. It's a bit mad, right? It's a bit blue-pilled. It's a bit not even that fucking real, dude. But it keeps him living. It's the same as religion for many people. It's like, well, I'm going to continue doing the right thing, and I'm going to continue living out day to day because eventually I'll go into this pretend happy land in the sky with Jesus and all my other friends, Moses, etc., and then everything will be happy times every single day. And that keeps people going because of that, because they blue-pilled themselves. And there's nothing wrong with that. Like, if that's the thing that keeps you going, if that's the thing that keeps you waking up each day and doing the right things toward the people in your life, then that's what you need. And for many people, even though, they're completely crazy, and even though if they didn't have religion, they'd, probably die, they end up being good people anyway, because the system of religion was built to give people something to look forward to give them a sense of purpose, and with morals in mind, to make them be kind and loving to each other, to make the collective of society more healthy and good as a whole. Because they saw, when they wrote those books down, subconsciously or consciously, that we've got to keep things together. And if everyone is nihilistic, without purpose, without anything to look forward to, then it's going to be harder to organize these people into a society. People are simple. People really are simple. You just need to be waiting for something and then waiting for the next thing and just constantly be waiting, and to have food and, dope things that inspire dopamine, and then you're set. Like, people act like they can philosophize and work around the systems of humanity that people need, but they can't, because a lot of those people, like Nietzsche and Stirner, kill themselves. So, like, what can you do? You can't really get around what humanity is. You can't really get around the fact that humans rely on each other intrinsically. You can't really get around that we have to blue pill ourselves unless you have an extreme amount of willpower, and even then you're probably pretty sad. So, there's not much you can do. You just have to keep on living, and you just have to do the things that give you a sense of purpose innately, and do the things that give you something to wait for. And as long as you can continue fostering a mindset in which you always feel that there's something to look forward to, then everything's fine.